The Bible says godliness with contentment is great gain. But does that mean I'm always to be accepting the way things are and passive? Or is there a place where there's faith, vision, hope, and a need for some change in my circumstances?
Let's see what the Bible says about that. Hey, welcome to the podcast. I'm glad you're here for this one. If you're watching on YouTube, you can go ahead and like, subscribe, share this video to someone who needs it. I'm glad you're here for this one. I'm super excited to have a discussion with Hannah and Kyle, and it's going to be good stuff today.
It's good. So welcome, you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yep. Hannah's been on before.
Yep.
We talked about burnout moms,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, that was a good one.
It was a
Good stuff. So good.
So today we're going to talk about some of the more practical dimensions of following Jesus, especially as it relates to life and family and contentment, vision, finances, decision-making, all of that stuff in the home. That's very real stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm sure moms and dads and anybody who's trying to walk out their faith today will find this practical and relevant. So tell everybody kind of where you are in life right now. Tell us about the Kirkman home.
Sure. So Kyle, Hannah, we've got 4 boys, Bowen, Shepherd, Conway, Stone. They are
I was going to say, come on, ages. Let's hear
almost
it.
10.
Come
Almost 10.
There you
Wow. 8. I know, that's insane.
How nice is that?
Double-digit kid. That's wild.
Don't cry now. You got it.
I won't trip. So 10, 8, 6, and then 4.
Yeah.
It just sounds like a lot of energy.
It's a lot.
A lot of testosterone.
A lot of wrestling.
It can be a lot. It can be fun, but then it could be a lot.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
A lot
of things
breaking.
I was about to say the same thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we've attempted to paint the house a few times, and that's just falls down on, there's footballs flying and soccer balls and all sorts.
I don't understand how kids get walls so
it's
dirty.
Yes, it's true. Yeah. But they put everything away at the end of every day, and it's all right and good, right?
Oh, yeah. That's right.
Make clean.
That's our desire.
That's right. Yeah.
That's so good.
Man,
So that's us. Yeah, no, and we've been married almost 11 years, I guess. So
awesome.
that's, we celebrated 10 years last year. It'll be 11 years in March this year. So
okay.
rocking and rolling, life is coming and going. It's
Okay.
moving quick.
And you don't have to tell where, but you work obviously full
I
time,
do.
right?
Yep. So I work for a company based in Dallas, and I actually office out of Las Colinas.
Okay.
So I'm an IT manager up in Las Colinas.
Nice.
Yep.
Okay.
They're usually 4 days a week. So Hannah's holding down the fort
Yeah.
Right.
most of the days on those days. So yeah.
Love it.
Nice.
And of course,
Yeah.
she's got her social media platform, which is incredible.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So I stay home with the boys from the get-go I have, and now we homeschool. So I'm homeschooling, and then I run my own business too on social media. So we
That's
do
a
all
lot.
of the things.
it
And
is.
a little DIY here and there. Still.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Here
Not
and there.
much.
Yeah.
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 We've curbed that enthusiasm a little bit.
Yeah.
We remodeled our last house, and we're like, we're good.
said-
We filled that cup.
Yeah.
We have DIY.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
check.
Done it.
Check
We
mark.
did it. Yep.
So as far as growing up, did you see that model in your home, both mom and dad working, or what was the picture you saw growing up for each of you? Just curious, kind of set the stage today.
Yeah, my mom was a stay-at-home mom,
Okay.
and so I always knew that's what
All
I
right.
wanted to do. I loved having my mom home.
Yeah.
My dad worked outside the home, but
Okay.
I always wanted to stay home with our kids.
Okay.
Do what my mama did.
All right.
Yeah, I think the concept of stay-at-home mom for me was a foreign topic when we first got married. I think it took me a little bit of an adjustment period. I grew up in a divorced home, and so mostly with my mom, single mother, she worked 2 or 3 jobs at a time. So that's what I knew.
Wow.
So it was one of those where we started on the topic of early on of stay-at-home mom, and I'm like, what does that mean?
You
how
want
does
to
that
do
work?
what?
Yeah.
That puts so much pressure on me. Like, so you take all that sort of burden. So it was definitely a learning curve on my end, but I mean, I wouldn't have it any other way now.
It's awesome.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
Love it.
Talk about faith that you saw in the home growing up as well, because I know that colors all of our perspectives of things we saw at home.
Sure.
So in the midst of growing up, what did you see? Was faith a part of home, or was it a Sunday only thing, or none of that?
So I always, I used this reference the other day talking to someone. It was the song by, it's like Brandon Lake and Elevation Worship, right? It's Talking to Jesus, right?
Yeah,
Where he
Love
says
that.
Sunday morning and Wednesday nights,
Yeah.
polo shirt and khaki pants.
Yeah.
That was probably my childhood as
Okay.
far as church is concerned, it was very religious. I don't think I had a relationship necessarily. I went through confirmation classes and Methodist class and in a Methodist church. And so it wasn't necessarily real deep in my faith, so to speak. It was more, that's what my mom took us to do, dropped us off and went and did that. So that's, I didn't really actually know my faith probably until my mid-20s, I think, probably. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. Hannah? How
Yeah,
about
mine
you?
was totally opposite of Kyle. I grew up in a strong Christian home.
Right.
Yeah, my mom's dad is still a Baptist preacher. My dad's parents were missionaries. And so you can kind of understand that dynamic of
Right.
the type of house we lived in. And so we were always at church, always at, Awana's. And my parents led Sunday school classes. They
groups,
did
all that.
home groups.
Yep.
We went
Wow.
on mission
Yep.
trips.
Wow.
And so, it was a
I'll tell you,
big
if you want to have a
part.
conversation, go talk to her papa. Ooh,
Yeah.
that's a good conversation
I
there.
bet.
Yeah.
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 That was what it was like in our home.
Okay.
Nice.
So, following Jesus, of course, brings in a lot of dynamics into a home that affects how we live. And then as we grow, we begin to change along the way in choices that we make, how we function in a home. When it comes to today, of course, there's the pressure of finances, trying to make it, these last 4 years, inflation, all of that has changed some dynamics. COVID era changed some things as well, working from home. You've got cultural pressures in the sense of, well, I want to have this for my kids because they see all their friends having these things. So I want to have all of that as well. You've got this also dimension where you want to honor God with what you have. You want to be at church. You want to give. You want to support. You want to be involved in groups. But that's a time demand. You've got kids at home. Work demands. And then you have this mixture of, well, we should just all be content with where we are. You shouldn't be trying to seek after more. And all of that can be a lot on the table at the time. And trying to figure out, okay, which one of these do I lean into? Do I work to provide more, or should I just be happy with where I am? Or do we give time and money to the Lord, to the church, or do we need to take care of ourselves first? So I know for Heather and I, that was always a tension, being in ministry. You didn't always have the amount of money that you needed at the time.
Sure.
God provided in other ways, but there was a tension in all of that. And there were times that we didn't give to the Lord or to the church because we were not making it, to the end of the week with the bills, with 5 kids at home. And so, there was that tension, and there was the tension of, well, man, I really want nicer things for our kids. So I understand all of that. And I know Truett's in the early phases of that, a different season.
So I was going to say, we've been married 3 years and have 2 young ones in the home and
ramping up.
Yeah, exactly. Like we are headed to that where we're like, oh, wow, at this rate, things are very hard to sustain, you know?
Yeah. So I was curious for you guys, what's the process been like as you've prioritized Jesus in your home? And what's that been like from the day one to where you are now?
Yeah. So, I think for us in speaking, strictly financial, I think that, for me, I know, especially like growing up, that was not something that I understood the concept of. I think I knew what tithing was, or I knew, giving the first of, I knew the words of it, but not necessarily what it actually meant. There's actually kind of a cool story though. When we were first married, as probably most, 20-something-year-old kids do when they first have their big people jobs, and you got money coming in. It's more money you've ever made in your life, whatever kind of thing is, we went out and we're like, you know what, we need a new car. And so, we did. And at the time, it was like we were living in some little 1,000 square foot rental home up in, where was that? At Crossroads.
Just outside of Denton.
Nice.
Wow.
And, so, just on a whim, We're like, let's go do this. Let's, you know.
We both were working at the time.
We did. We both had a job, you know. I mean, this, you know, and it wasn't like it was now. You know, your dollar went a little further then, right? Which is, but still, to say that we came home, I think we ended up with like a 12% interest, which is insane.
I'm telling you,
right?
we
Like,
were
It was
not
like a
wise.
$375 a month payment. It was like, what were we doing? You know, and it was not a
what
godly
year is
decision.
this?
This was 2014.
Okay.
2013, 2014.
2014,
All right.
right? And so we bought this car, and again, we didn't consult God at all in this. It was like, man, we want this thing, we're going to do it. And, and I'm telling you, not 7-8 months into owning this car, we were up in the Denton area, right, which kind of has some pretty good storms that blow through, and there was one storm that came through. Hannah was at work. She worked in Denton. I was traveling down to Carrollton at the time. And storm blew through, and I mean, just the biggest hail you've ever seen in your life. I'm not kidding. It was amazing.
Wow.
The first storm blew through when she was at the office in Denton, and it hit, like, I'm talking like softball
They were
size.
like,
I was going to ask you.
Yeah, it was like softball size hail, right?
Insanity.
Just absolutely obliterated her windshield.
I'm like,
right?
what are we going to do?
It hit a couple of times on her car, which was like, okay, you know, the new car. And we're like, oh, this is devastating. Like,
Dude,
you know,
that's crazy.
we're paying money for this. Like,
And
this
you
is
had
insane.
it for, you had it just months. Basically. That's
It's like custom dents, you know. It's like so that storm blew over, and she came home, and I remember we both got home later that afternoon, evening, whatever it was, and we're sitting there, and we're looking outside. I remember walking out in the front. You remember that? Remember we looked over, and it was like green and blue. I mean, it's crazy colors.
Terrifying outside.
Terrifying.
So
I
a
was like,
second
this is
storm was
insane.
coming.
Oh
Yes.
my.
Another storm was coming through. So we had 3 cars at the time. Well, sort
between
of.
the two of you. That's awesome.
Well, so we had her new car.
Okay.
We had an old like Mazda that she had driven forever.
Kyle got my hand-me-down.
Yes.
Nice.
So I was driving this little Mazda 3, right? That her mom bought brand new in 2006.
Nice.
Yeah.
That thing
So
was
it kind of got passed down.
Right.
And then Kyle, we hadn't sold yet his truck.
nice.
He had
yes.
a truck.
Okay.
I had a truck
But
from
we
high
did
school.
not have it insured
That's
because
right.
we weren't driving
Nice.
it.
That's right.
And we had a 1-car garage.
Oh yeah.
So it was
Nice.
like, okay, obviously the
This is
truck
the car
has to
going
go
in the garage.
In the
Yeah.
garage. It
Not
didn't even
insured.
fit.
Yeah.
So we had to like cover the back end
Oh my
with cardboard.
goodness.
I mean,
We were-
you can just
this
imagine.
is-
That's
So-
This is some MacGyvered stuff.
So
Yearning out.
we left the other 2 cars outside. It
We
was
did.
like my car had already got hit. Kyle's car.
Well,
was
and okay, so
whatever.
and be fair, like you guys have probably been through hailstorms, right? And they've
Yeah.
never really been like, oh,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
it's okay. It just kind of comes and goes, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very brief.
Yes.
Yeah.
This was the mother of all storms. I'm not kidding. This was like I wish we had the video still. It was, maybe you do, but
Yeah, I'll show you later.
it hailed so hard and so bad. It was hitting in our backyard, and like you could see literally like mud
It would-
explosions.
Yeah.
Like, and it was like
then
everywhere. I
the
mean,
ground
everywhere.
outside, it looked like it had snowed. It was white.
It was
everywhere.
covered.
Goodness.
So
So-
both the new car that we just got her 7 months prior to that, and then of course the Mazda that we had.
Yeah.
That one wasn't a big deal.
Absolutely trashed.
Absolutely toasted. I mean, it looked like I've seen golf balls with less dents than that car had.
It was
Like
bad.
it was nuts. So anyway, to cut that
to the
down,
good
right?
part.
So basically, what happened is, you know, obviously there's a huge insurance claim that happened. You know, State Farm came out and they did their whole drive-through tent, whatever, and you go get it assessed.
Golly.
So I think at the time, 8 months prior to that, we bought the car. I think the sticker price on it was like $14,995, right? And then you got TTL, all that stuff. I think it came out to like around $16,000 or so. That's what we took from the bank. We're sitting there in State Farm line, and
The guy looked at us and he's like, your car's totaled.
yeah,
And I was like, oh my gosh. And I called my dad and I'm like, what are we going to do? The guy said, do you have gap insurance? I'm like, what's that?
what's that? Huh?
So I called my dad
yeah.
and he's like, it's okay. Cause I was telling him like,
Right.
okay, my car's totaled. We owe money and then we're going to have to go buy a new car. Like, how
Just
do you
double
do
up.
this? And
Yeah.
my dad said, Hannah, if it's just cosmetic, you can buy your car back. And I'm like,
What does that mean?
I'm sorry, what?
Huh?
He was like, you can pay off the remainder.
Yep.
Your insurance will
Yep.
cover the rest and you get to take your car.
Yep. So they
Your
take
car's
like
paid off.
they take like a salvage price and they deduct it from
Wow.
whatever. So basically,
Okay.
what he came back with, which was kind of insane to begin with, is the guy that assessed it, like right then and there, came back and said, "Oh, well, we value your car at like $17,500." So first of all, I'm like, well, we didn't say nothing because
Don't say that.
we paid like 15 grand for this car, but you're giving us $2,500 more. I was like, cool, thanks, man.
Yeah.
So he valued it like 17.5, and then they took the salvage price out of it, like what it would cost for them to salvage the car, which was another couple $1,000.
Yeah.
I think we ended up walking away with like a check for like $12,000,
Oh my.
which we took, right, and put that into the actual payment of the car. We ended up selling my truck, and then basically paid off her brand new car
and the insurance check from the Mazda.
and the insurance.
And
check
so
from
it
Mazda.
was like the exact amount that we needed.
That's right.
To pay off my loan. But here is this part gets me all emotional. It's so
All
cool.
right, good.
So
Yeah.
my desire was to be a stay-at-home mom.
Yes.
Okay.
And so Kyle and I had gotten married in
March.
March. This happened in April.
Okay.
Unbeknownst to
Wow.
us, I was pregnant and didn't know it yet. And so the Lord knew my desires.
Yep.
He knew the desires of my
That's
heart. And
so
I would not have been able to be a stay-at-home mom
That's right.
because we needed my income to make that car payment.
Wow.
And so it was wiped.
Mm-hmm.
And I drove around a beat up.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
It's
I
more
mean,
aerodynamic that way.
Left the dents in it. Huh?
Left it in.
yeah, so did
We
Kyle
drove
though.
it.
I mean, Kyle chose to as well. I
I
mean,
drove.
he
Yeah.
bought his car back. We both
Yep.
drove around cars that were annihilated by hail, but
That is
It worked. I mean, the car was
What a
perfectly
story.
functional. It just has a bunch of, we got the windshield fixed, obviously.
Yeah, so
Sure,
you're not
sure.
just driving around.
Yeah, but
Windshield.
otherwise it was just real dented.
but it was a real.
Wow.
It was our first. What do I want to say? Experience as adults of seeing
Yeah.
the Lord provide
Yes. Yeah.
financially
That's right.
in a time where we were
Reckless.
we were
Yeah.
well, yeah, that
Wow.
too. But also, like
yeah.
we were so concerned. How are we even going to make this work?
Wow.
I mean,
Yep.
nothing
That's so
made
good.
sense.
Yeah, yeah.
But then
Yep.
it was like, hey, if you can humble yourselves and drive around a beat up car,
Yeah. Yep.
right?
That was the biggest lesson I think we learned there is like, it wasn't, I mean, yes, God provided all these financial things, but like to us, he like literally shed that layer of like this consumerism sort of thing that happens
Nice.
where you're like,
Yeah.
I have to have
Yeah.
this nice
Gotta
thing.
have the nicest,
Yeah.
best
Right?
news. Yeah,
And
yeah.
to us, it was like, what if it's like free? Like, what if we have this like free car?
Yeah.
Like, who cares
Yeah.
what it looks like?
Yeah.
It looks great on the inside.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Everything
Yeah.
on the inside is perfect, right?
Wow. Still
Just
have
the
that new
outside.
car smell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
New
Yeah.
car smelling.
Right.
That's
And then,
all.
it's like, so for us, I think humbling is a great word
Wow.
there, is to say
That's
like, it
awesome.
truly was this like humbling experience to be like, well,
So good.
who cares? Like, who's
Yeah.
judging us? Like,
Yeah.
Wow.
so we get to tell, that was the cool part is like, even if someone does judge us for it, we get to like
Oh,
share
we
this
actually
story
follow
about
up
how
with you on
God
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Golly, that's
did this
awesome.
in our life, which
I
is,
love.
which
I've
is so
shared
cool.
that.
So,
I've shared this story so many times.
yep.
I have friends and they're like, "Can God put a little hail cloud above my car?"
Yeah, right.
Yeah. That's good.
Can I fast forward that story a little bit too? Because
Yeah.
there's like a part 2 to that as well,
Come on.
actually.
Good.
So that same car we drove for basically 2 kids, right? We had Bowen and then Shepherd in both that vehicle. So we had the 2 car seats. It was a great little family car. It was a little
Yeah.
Chevy Equinox, right?
Love it.
And it was a great car. And it was the best car in the world. That's appropriate now. We can
Yeah,
buy it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
It works.
Chevy Equinox, right? And we were driving it. And I don't remember how old. Sheppy was still kind of a baby. He was probably we were
He was 3
still
months old.
counting him in months. Let's
Yeah,
put it that way,
yeah.
right? And we were driving around in like uptown Dallas a little bit and going shopping or whatever we were doing. And we ended up getting in a car wreck. Lady pulled out in front of us in this car, right? We'd already gotten the whole insurance thing for this Equinox, whatever. She pulled out in front of us and we hit kind of the front end of our car and it crumpled it. That was a whole experience. That was fun. That we had to go wait for a tow truck and all that. It was
Miserable.
that was
2 kids.
entertaining. So yeah, with kids, car seats are just like
That's
we're just
miserable.
piling things into a shopping cart and walking around wherever we could. It was
Walked around Home Depot.
Home Depot.
with
Yep.
a Target shopping cart
That's
we
right.
found in a parking lot with car seats,
Car seats.
piled in.
Kids, just kids and strapped on whatever and whatever we had in the car, we had to pull out anyway. It was fun.
I hate that.
So to
My
kind of
car
fast.
was totaled a second
It
time.
was. So apparently in the state of Texas, and I don't know this, and maybe someone can fact check this, but like I'm pretty sure what we found out is like you can't total a car from hail damage, right?
No.
Technically.
No, you can't.
Can you?
It's totaled, yes, but it's not like a salvage title.
Like a
Does that make
salvage.
sense?
That's right. That's
So
right.
anyways, it was totaled like mechanically.
Yeah, so like mechanically, we took
wow.
it to one
Wow.
of the shops up here in Midlothian because we were living in Midlothian at the time. And we'd moved down here. We took it over there, and the guy, added it all up, and it went over the 70% threshold or whatever it was. And he was like, "Oh yeah, this car's totaled." We're like, okay, right? This is wild. And I think at the time we knew we were going to have more kids, and we were like, well, we need to.
What are we going to do?
A bigger car, right? And so we ended up getting like another $7,000 or something out of that car.
Oh my word!
From a thing, right?
And
it's like
providing.
It's the car that keeps on giving. You know, it's like so. And then we ended up turning that into the minivan. You know, we had the opportunity to
having more babies
save up to that and turn that into the minivan, and we drove that minivan up until this last summer. Yeah. We actually cried over the minivan. Like we did. We were cleaning over. So sad. We were
so part of the family.
You know, it was.
That's so good.
Anyway, that's good. An incredible story of how God has used sort of our idiocracy in some decision making, right, for a good story that we can now share with everybody.
Yeah, that's so
love
good.
That. Yeah, and he does that. There are times he just does it as an act of mercy and grace when we haven't deserved it.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
1,000%.
100%.
Yeah. But then there are times where even Jesus talked about, hey, I know you're going to worry and stress, but I don't want you to, especially over things like food and clothing and house. Jesus said, he said, instead, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. So that's more on the intentional side, like, okay, well, I am going to make some choices here that I'm going to honor Jesus first.
Oh, yeah.
So, and then, of course, you have verses like out of Proverbs, honor the Lord with your possessions and the first fruits of all your increase, and your vats will be overflowing and your barns full. So I'm sure you've taken some of those steps as well.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There's been the grace and mercy side, but then there's more of the I'm choosing to follow Jesus.
Yeah.
What has that process been like for you guys over the years?
Okay. So 2 years ago.
Okay, I was going that story too. Yeah. Okay.
2 years ago,
Through my
and
mind
Kyle shared part of his testimony on one Sunday. There we go.
Yeah. February 27th.
Yes.
Nice.
So where you want to share this? Go.
The
That's
testimony?
yours.
Yeah. No, so that was right. That was the one where I think I really relinquished control over things in my life that were not in my control fully. Right. And, you know, I think we all submit in our lives. We all submit to, you know, Christ as our Savior, and we all submit certain things, but there's certain aspects of our life that we still try to like hold on to. And even it's, you know, I think the point is you take up your cross daily, right? There's a reason for that, right? It's like you still have to actively choose that.
Yes.
And so for me in that day was, you know, I had the panic attack in the car, and it was the first time in my life, it was a full surrender of like, God, if you are taking my life and bringing me to your kingdom, like, let's go, you know. First time in my life, right? And I haven't experienced it since or whatever. So, but that was a hard moment. And so that, I think sort of after the fact of getting through that and understanding that, you know, situationally what happened there, it just sort of lit a fire in my life. And I think for us, it's like full surrender of like, it doesn't matter what's happening financially for us. Like the first of things that are coming in are the first to go out, period. Like there's no question asked.
At this point, we were not consistently tithing.
Not regularly.
And nor have we ever truly.
Yeah, that's right.
And I know like 10%, right? I think it's more of a heart posture.
Yes.
100%.
But even when at a previous church we were tithing, but it wasn't 10%,
like, well,
but
how much
also
can we
it
do
was
now?
kind of like, like I'm going to give the bare minimum. Does that make sense that we can afford?
Yep.
Well, this time after Kyle's panic attack and he was making changes, which I loved as a wife. And he said, we need to start tithing. And we did not even look at our finances.
Nope.
We literally went onto the church app and we were like, 10%
what's our paycheck every 2 weeks? What is that? And then here you go.
And just automatically set it up.
So it's no longer just a sense of, well, we have to, or
it was
a desire.
100%.
Yeah, it was a desire.
Absolute desire. And
it wasn't something that we like, you know, start looking at our bank. How much can we afford? It was like, no, we're going to just do 10%.
Wow.
Because
and I think
we had that desire.
You said it right too. It's such a heart posture. It's not about the money necessarily. Like that's not what the pursuit of it is. It's knowing that God is in full control of your life always and over everything. Right. And that should be the first of everything that you do. Right. It's like you had a sermon last week or the week before. It was like, well, what do you do in the first of your day? Right. And that inspired me. I woke up every day now and I've read the book of John. Every day.
Nice.
I read a chapter every
Way to
morning.
go.
Like, that's the first
So
thing
good.
I do.
That's
Right?
good.
Because I used to get up and you just kind of doom scroll through whatever.
You're like, let's start my day off miserably. This is
You know,
great.
I check emails, like all this stuff,
Oh,
and it just pivots your attitude, right? And it's
That's
like,
true.
man, if you could just read through the book of John or the book of whatever,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
and just start your day that
So
way.
good.
So with that, going back to the story, there is that sort of dedication of our finances and that decision making of just giving God control. You know, it's still a daily struggle, right? It's not like you can just do it
It's
once and be like, we're
all
good.
right,
You know, we did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Right.
it. You know,
Yeah.
Right.
we're good now.
Yeah.
You know, it was, hey, we're gonna dedicate our finances to doing this. We're gonna give God control over the things in our life and how things were going at the time. And I think what story you were leading to, and I'll let you jump into it, is, you know, I think financially at the time, this is where things were. I think we were year 2 into the 4-year of the previous presidency, right? And I think that's when a lot of things started to really tighten up for people. Right?
Yeah.
I think you started to see markets start to jump, interest rates were up, and everything just started to
Savings
squeeze.
dwindle.
Right?
Yeah.
That's right. And for us, we were stretching as much as we could, and this was before her social media stuff, whatever. This was still single income family for us, and you know, at the time it was a struggle because at work for me it was more about the culture of people I was around. I've known those individuals that I've been working with for so long, and you know, it wasn't necessarily a financial decision to stay there, right? Because financially I could make other decisions to go somewhere else, right? And so, but that positionally starts making you think in life. You're like, man, if only I had X amount more dollars, right? And you start to figure out what is the value worth on those decisions, right? And then for us, it was fully submitting, like, you know, God is going to lead us in a direction that He wants us to go, right? Fully commit to that. And I think for us, we really saw that start to take place and start to take shape, because one day I broke down to Hannah and I said, listen, I feel so stressed. This is like, what, probably May.
So that was like February or March that we started tithing.
Yeah.
Maybe
a couple
3
months, 2 months,
3 months into it, we started feeling it. Started feeling it.
Wow.
And I'll never forget telling my mom, we started tithing. And not that you expect everything to like,
Right.
Yeah.
That's not how it works.
10 times my salary,
That's
actually.
right.
Like, no, you're actually giving still.
Yes. And so
your timing and God's timing are two completely different things.
Yes.
And
yes.
I'll never forget my mom saying, do not stop tithing, because that is what the enemy wants. He wants you to think that the Lord's not going to provide. She was like, do not. And I'm like, okay, Mom, okay. Even though everything in you is like, Lord, can we have like 2% of that back?
Yeah.
Right.
But we
Just
didn't.
like, you know, under the
But
table.
we didn't.
Yeah.
And so we had to, you know, at that moment you're changing spending habits and whatever. And I'm not going to, like, we're not extravagant type people. And so it's still, I'm like, what else can we minimize?
And we're in a position too where, like, when we're in this house here in Waxahachie that we had bought in 2020, and this was before housing went insane, right? And so we got, our mortgage isn't wild. We don't, we don't have a car payment, right? We don't have any of that, right? So
At
like
that
the time, right? We didn't have a car payment. Like, so all the normal sort of like consumer things
Pressures,
that should be burdening you, right? We didn't have. So we were like, so for us, that pressure started happening a couple months after February, right? And it was like, oh man, like how is this belt so tight around us?
Yeah.
Like, what are we gonna do? And it was to the point where I think one night I broke down to Hannah, and I was like,
I'll never forget having my head on your chest, and I'm crying, and Kyle's telling me, I think I need to update my resume. We're not gonna make it.
Wow.
There's no way that we can.
Yeah. I mean, we were getting down to the point of like, we were stretching, and it's not like I don't have a good job, right? I mean, I have a really solid career, right? And it's like, the unfortunate part of that is like every bit of that was just getting used somewhere. And again, it's not like, we're not heavy spenders. We're not
I mean,
buying.
You have 4 boys to feed. I mean, how much more can you cut down on
activities
food?
But everything was more expensive, right? Your electric was going up, your insurance was going up. Like all these things were just
to live life,
right? Just to live, right?
Just to get by.
And so for us, it was just that stress of that. And I think and I'll let you jump into the story, which is incredible, but we had a vacation that we had planned with my family to go to Georgia, which is where my grandparents were at, right?
Golf courses.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place. It's one of my favorite places on earth. St. Simon's Island, Georgia. So it's amazing. But we had already planned a trip, and I told Hannah, I said, we had about $800 in our savings account total. Like that was it.
Wow.
We had no other money.
No one, that was it.
Wow.
So we had whatever our normal like money was. Yeah, whatever our normal money was that we had
This
from
was
our.
like at the beginning of a paycheck. Like,
That's right. Yeah.
you have to make it through 2 weeks
Yeah.
and drive to Georgia to meet other
Right.
people on
So
vacation.
we had so we had the normal paycheck, which was paying for the normal house stuff, whatever, and then we had like an additional
Which,
$800 in the savings
By
account.
the
That
way,
was it.
when we go on vacation with our lodging and everything is
Usually
already
taken care
paid
of.
for.
If it's a family
Oh,
trip
wow.
like
We
that,
just
they
had
take
to
care
pay
of it,
for
right?
gas to get there.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it wasn't like
Whatever
we spent
entertainment
all
we
of our
do,
money
yeah.
on
Yeah.
a vacation.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
were just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but it
Tagging
was
along.
it was like, okay, well, you have to drive. We're driving because we don't fly. I don't like to fly, so we drive.
Oh,
Yeah.
welcome to the club.
Road trip. You know?
Yeah, I don't care how long it is.
Take
Fly.
the trip. Yeah.
Chloe's
Take the
like,
show
I'm
on the
not
road.
driving
Yeah.
longer than 3 hours.
I love road trips.
Yeah.
I'll drive all over.
Yes.
So we left. We literally left our house knowing it was like, well, this might be it for a while, right? And we were like, you know what, God, like, we literally said this. I remember. I think we ended up talking about it. We're like, God, we're putting this to you. Like, this is it. Like, we know that this is sort of a pivotal moment for us, and you're going to show us after this trip whether or not I need to go get a new job, or you're going to provide it another way,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera, et
it was
cetera.
all
So-
happening in like a week.
Yeah.
All
And it's
of
like,
these
wow.
things.
So we took this trip and we left on a road
Yeah.
trip, $800.
And you have confidence that something's going to happen. And it's,
I wouldn't say. I think confidence is a strong word. I think we had faith.
But
Oh,
you're
for
a-
sure.
you're a fir-
Kyle
like-
says $800. I'm pretty sure it was more like 400.
It may have been. I don't know.
It was not.
It was not. It was enough to say like we're going to go on a vacation for a week, and that's probably going to dwindle pretty low. Right?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
you consider
Yeah.
you got to stay in a hotel overnight. You got gas prices and
Yeah.
all that stuff. Like it was
Yeah.
going to dwindle. I mean,
Yeah.
you're going to
Sure.
spend $400 or $500 just getting there.
instantly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
But
And,
you're saying
you know-
in this moment, you're like, I believe you're going to provide. Like we've seen you do it before.
yep,
I believe you're going to, I don't know how in the world, I don't know what in the world this is going to look like.
We did.
But that's kind of the
Yeah.
mentality
we
you're in.
kind of
I mean,
we
yeah.
chose to believe that
And
God
then
would.
in the back of my mind, I'm like, can we pause our tithe?
Yeah,
before we go
yeah,
on
yeah.
vacation?
Wow.
Just
No, for
kidding.
sure.
But that's
Yeah.
the faithfulness that came out of it is like we didn't. We just took what was there and what was already provided,
Yeah.
and we just
So good.
we just did
That's
it,
encouraging
right? And
right
so
there.
It was
that
kind of
turned
like
into,
okay, we're still going to go on this trip because it's already paid
Yeah.
for.
Yeah.
yeah,
And when we get back home,
We'll figure
we'll
it out.
figure it
Deal
out.
with it.
That's
Yep.
right.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I think for us that was sort of the reprieve of it was like, hey, we've got this vacation, and we're just going to turn it over and say, okay, like God, we'll figure this out,
Yeah.
right? And I
Okay.
think that turned into
So yeah,
this is cool.
before we left, I'm thinking, okay, Kyle loves the people he works with. And this is one reason it makes me so sad. Whenever that night that I like was laying on it and crying, and I was like, he loves the people he works with so much. I don't want him to have to leave to chase money
Yeah.
and be miserable because he could
Yeah.
go get a new job
Yeah.
where he's making more money.
The grass
right?
is not always greener, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
but
Yeah.
he
Exactly.
could not enjoy the people that he worked with.
Right.
And so it kind of made me feel guilty, but I don't know if that's really the right word, maybe just heartbroken
Yep.
that it was a hard decision.
Yep.
Ugh. And so I was like, okay, so at this point I already had a following on social media.
Right.
And I was like, okay, how can I bring in money? Because people make money online.
Yeah.
And at this
This
point I
is-
was making nothing.
This was
Yeah.
you had around like 40,000 followers or something.
I
think,
don't
like
remember.
That. So
Maybe.
I mean, it was significant,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
40,000 followers, but this
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
this was transitioning from your DIY account
Yeah.
into the burnout
Motherhood.
account, the motherhood account that she
Yes.
just had, right? So
Yeah.
this all that was happening at the same time, of that February timeline. So
Wow.
she was transitioning her social media and
Yeah.
sort of had this following kind of uptick
Yeah.
into May, June of that year.
Yeah. So
Anyway, go ahead.
okay, so yeah, so this was already transitioning into the motherhood stuff, and so I was like, how can I bring in just a little bit?
Yeah.
just
Exactly.
a little bit.
Something.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, you know what? We're gonna make a cleaning checklist.
Yes.
Cleaning
Yes.
checklist, okay?
Wild.
Because
Yes.
I'm now talking to moms, right? A lot of them are stay-at-home moms. A lot of them are homeschooling moms, and sometimes life just gets
Yes.
a little hard, and you need like checklists sometimes
Yes.
to stay
Yeah.
on track.
Yeah.
And so I
I'm
was
with
like,
you.
Speaking this
okay,
guy's language.
I can
Checklist
use.
for
Yeah.
Yeah.
I already have a Canva account. I can make a Canva template.
Yeah.
I researched how to, sell digital products. So I made this chart and I sold it for $3.
It wasn't even a piece of paper. It was a PDF file.
PDF. Yeah. You
PDF
print it
file.
out yourself, right? You can
$3
edit it, all of
and 50
this.
cents.
And I was like, $3.
And 50
So
cents.
I made a reel. I even remember what it was about.
I don't remember.
And it was, something relating to moms that need help with whatever. And so what you can do is very cool is there's DM automation. If you've heard of this,
DM
where you
automation.
comment.
Yeah.
So I would say comment
And this will
link,
send to you. Yeah.
and it will automatically
Automatically
send them
Yep.
a link. So I kind of got to take a step back,
Nice.
and it automatically sends it. Well,
Yep.
as we are driving on our road trip,
You posted it, I think, on
posted
that
it.
Thursday when we left.
I
Yeah.
posted it, I think in the car
You did.
as we're
Yep.
driving, because I've got plenty of time to like set it up.
Sure.
Passenger
drive.
princess.
We get a couple hours in and I'm like, oh my gosh, we made $40.
On a $3.50 template.
Let's stop at
Right.
Chick-fil-A.
Let's use it.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Lunch is
like,
covered.
and we were
Yeah.
just like looking at each other like, this could be really cool.
Yeah.
And we kept
It's so
driving.
wild.
We get to St. Simon's and I'll never forget. So
It's about a 16-hour drive.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Road trip.
Yep.
we're on,
Road trip. Yep.
So we're there on vacation. Every once in a while I'll go in and I'll like see, and
Yeah.
it would like, it's a $3 item.
Yeah,
But, like,
yeah.
it would like
takes a
slowly
while.
creep up.
Yep.
And we were on the beach one day because it's a barrier island. And so we were on the beach and I'll never forget checking it. And I was like,
Kyle.
it's at $1,200.
$1,200.
Let's go. That's
$1,200.
Right.
It
A
was
$3.50 item.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
It was.
And so
insane.
I'm telling you, like
Dude.
the elation
It
we
was-
had for that was incredible.
That
it
is,
was
like,
one of those
so
moments
wild.
Yeah.
where, and we'll talk more about this,
Mm-hmm.
about I had made nothing on
Yeah.
social media
Yeah.
before. I was doing
That's
DIY,
crazy.
home, all of this
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
I pivoted my account to start talking about motherhood,
Yeah.
faith,
Yeah.
struggles.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like once I aligned myself with what the Lord
Yeah.
Yeah.
wanted me
That's
to
so good.
do,
Yes.
that's
Yes.
where I saw
Yes.
these blessings start
Yep.
to come out of it, rather than,
Yep.
just
So good.
sharing just
Right.
because.
Right.
And I think so that was a year and a half ago.
Yep.
Right.
Wow.
And now it's seeing how the
Yeah.
Lord has continued to provide
Man.
That's
the more
Well,
through
and I think
my social media.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think it's, I don't know why. I don't,
Yeah.
sometimes it's
Yes.
like, okay, is it because I'm being
Question.
obedient?
Yeah.
Is it
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I'm
Well, I was going to say,
what is it?
you would align it with your choice, I'm sure, to keep honoring the Lord with your
Yeah.
finances and
Yes.
possessions.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's-
Yeah.
You have to put all that together as
Yeah.
well.
And
Yeah.
I think what was really important there is that God aligned not just Hannah's heart, not just my heart, but our household,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And so, and took the design of what He's created for us and aligned us both in that same time
Yeah.
of life,
Yep.
right? And said,
for like a
"Here's your faithfulness, right?
Yep.
And here's what it is." And I'm not trying to be like, this is prosperity gospel or anything like
Yeah.
that,
No.
because it's
Right.
not about the financial aspect of it.
No.
It was, God is good. And it was like that, the rebound we saw on His faithfulness to us was
Exactly. Yeah.
incredible
Yeah.
in that week. I mean, I remember it was wild. I'm like, how is this? I mean, literally you're sitting there thinking to yourself, like, how is this even possible?
Yeah.
That this
Yeah.
little bitty thing that created from nothing that Hannah did,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
On a whim almost, right?
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like turned into this like
It's almost like
fruitfulness that God
My
is.
Hail Mary in
Yeah.
a sense,
Yeah.
It really
like
was, yeah.
we got to make some kind of
It's
money,
something, right?
but-
And so, and then that's, as she kind of mentioned, right? It's kind of pivoted into something further when now she's got to really take the approach of like sharing sort of life with people on Instagram and her social media, which is now pivoted into like showing God's greatness and faithfulness and how He's using our life and
So good.
that kind of stuff. So it's been, that was kind of an incredible.
Which it's really cool because this whole, selling a digital product type thing is the exact same feelings that we had when my car was totaled. How are we going to make it?
Yep.
How, and the Lord provided. And the same thing whenever we started tithing,
Wow.
the economy was not doing too hot and we
Yep.
were feeling it. And it's like,
Yep.
how are we going to make it? But the Lord provides.
Wow.
I mean, I don't.
It's the surrender. I think that's what the search of it, right, is not necessarily that God cares that you're giving the money, right? It's the surrender of the heart that is the engagement.
Which also, as soon as is that first $1,200 from that digital product, when you have to like cash it out, it goes into your bank account. The very first thing we did was, here's our 10%,
That's right.
you know?
That's
and
right.
so it's so cool. Like, I'm like,
That's insane.
none of this would have been possible,
That's right.
Lord.
Yeah.
And so it's like, even from, you know, my income, like you were the one that made this possible to be able to make it.
Yeah, and I think out of all that too, the things that stand out to me is like all of that stuff happened out of the vulnerabilities, out of the like, we're desperate. Like we are at the end of ourselves.
Yep.
Like there is nowhere else to go. Literally, all we can do is turn to you, you know? And it's like, boom, that's what I'm after right there. The surrender, like you're saying, you know, like I'm after your heart in this. I'm not after a dollar amount. I'm not after like go and do these things specifically, you know, but it's like, where are you going to actually seek me and then be able to be vulnerable and then be able to like share, you know, God with other people and all that. So it's like literally out of that vulnerable surrender area, God's like, I'm blessing that, you know, that's incredible. Yeah. That is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it's been cool.
It reminds me of the story in the Old Testament where the woman and her son, it's in a time of real poverty and they have nothing left. And they have, basically she says, we have enough left for one meal and then we're going to die. And the prophet shows up and says, well, I want you to make a meal for me first. She's like, are you serious? I mean, that's all I've got.
About it to say.
And so she does, and God enables the oil and the flour to just multiply. Because she chose to honor the Lord first. Kind of pictures that.
That's an incredible.
For me. For y'all.
And again, it's like right in the areas where there's the pain, where there's the tension, where there's like the confusion, all this stuff. And God's like, I'm speaking right to that area, you know, to the weakest, most vulnerable part. Like, that's what I want, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it's important too to remember, like, these are, I mean, I think for us, these are like real big stories that we're telling here of like how God has moved huge things. So I think it's important too that, you know, each and every day we have to, it's a reminder to like look for those small things that God is doing, right? Because it's not always going to be these big surrendering moments of you know, faithfulness. It's like there's still small things in life that you have to surrender each and every day. And then you kind of have to find what God is doing there because it's not always abundantly clear. So
it's not always in like the career change or something like that, or the like, oh, I got this big old paycheck or something, you know, but it's like in the day-to-day aspects of that, that's like literally how you become who you are is in that. It's so good.
And it sounds like this was not just a Kyle thing or just a Hannah thing. Right? This is the two of you together.
That's right.
You're talking about these things.
And with
praying about these things. You're making these things. Crying. Exactly. I'm sure you're seeking God together in these things and that He blesses both of you as a result of that. Blesses your whole home.
Right.
Wow.
So
Was there ever a sense of resistance from one just to, you know, or was it more of like, okay, no, we're together in this thing? Because I know that's tough. That's tough decisions sometimes.
I think if anything, like, it's just, I think maybe the way I am, I don't think there was a resistance at all. I think I was more like, you know, oh, if God can do this and like, let's do this, you know, let's just go for it, you know, home run. Let's say that, you know, just swing for the fence. And I think, you know, for that purpose, it's been like, well, let's kind of walk before you run here, you know, situation. So, you know, it's
absolutely.
like, but I don't think there was any resistance at all. I think we just sort of let it go. I mean, and let it, you know, obviously still to this day, I mean, there's still things where we've had to be, you know, stewards of that, right? Just stewards of that blessing. Cause it's again, to the point of like, where I was like, well, let's just, you know, hit the gas pedal and get going. It's like, well, are you really being a steward of the blessing that God has given you? Right. And it's like, that's very easy to say like, well, look, God has given us this abundance, right? And I'm just going to take this abundance and I'm going to go over here and use it in a way that maybe God didn't intend for you to use it. Right. So we're kind of figuring that out a little bit.
Let's talk about this idea of what you brought up, that when you choose to obey like that and choose to honor God with the first fruits, it isn't going to always equal into more money or more possessions, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And you experience that. How are you still processing through that? Like, okay, this is not always just an investment opportunity. This is just part of what we do. And if it leads to increase, great. If it leads to decrease, are you still okay with that? I mean, where are you in your thought process with that?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I mean, because I think for us, it's, if we're being honest, right, the blessings that you receive sometimes can, lose the initial shine, right? The same fire that was lit upon that initial blessing, right? Of what we're talking about a year and a half ago. You get so far removed and life happens and things like that, that initial sort of like shininess of that blessing is sort of like, you just kind of get accustomed to it, right? It's like, look, God's been blessing this way. You almost have to have like conversations like this or like reminders of things that happen where like it is a blessing. What's happened is are you being a good steward? Are you using that in certain ways, right? And, I think that it's challenging because in the society we kind of live in today, it's like you kind of always want more, right? It's just sort of a human nature to be like, well, that person has that. Like, I want that, right? Or they have that. And I think we've had this passion in our family where we've prayed over it and we've said, God willing, if you'll let this happen is, we would love to have an area or property, so to speak, for our kids to sort of grow up on and have that sort of like, hey, you want to go chop down a tree, right? Like go play.
Our thing is like, having 4 boys, that is literally how they are wired to run, explore, to be adventurous. And where we're at right now, while we love our home, we love our neighbors. And so it kind of goes into the thing about, is it okay to desire more?
Yeah.
And so like we have these desires and I think they're good.
Yes.
Yep.
But sometimes I can feel really guilty of like, Give me.
Yeah. You're like, but look at how much you've given me. What, am I being wrong?
Am I being so selfish that, like you've already provided so much.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like,
could you
okay,
just
but
give like this much more?
Yeah.
That's just a little bit more just so we could do this.
And so I think,
but
I don't know. I think it's the root of, and it's like, I think the reasons that we want this are good.
Yes.
It's not, they're not necessarily selfish or like to raise ourselves in society or whatever.
Right.
It's, we're looking at it as what would be best for our family.
Absolutely.
Right. Like, so and I think those things are good, but I still struggle with
that's true. And that extends to, really anything that, if I'm going through like, stuff with work and I'm like, man, is this really the right career for me? Or, do I pivot this way or do I pivot that? It's like, well, okay, well, ask myself the why. Like what's the true heart reason of what I'm looking for, right? Yes. Is it the pursuit of more money, right? And is that wrong? Or is that like, what is the root of that?
Yeah.
Right. Or
is it trying to keep up with the guy next door?
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And so it's like, you have to like check yourself in some cases and turn to the Lord and say, God, why are you putting this on my heart, on my mind, right? And figuring out, to your point, right, the root of the source of that concern or that want or that desire, right? And so, I think for us, we're in that moment. I think now for us is
in the thick of that,
where we're trying to figure out. I know I certainly am from a career perspective. Like I've been doing this similar sort of thing for the last decade now, right? Which seems insane because I don't feel like it's been 10 years, but and I ask myself, I'm like, what is the desire? I think I'm finding out the why, which is that I want to be able to spend more time with Hannah and the kids, right? And I think that's my why. Like
is there more to life than just going to a 9 to 5?
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, and it's like the desire of my heart, and I think is to spend more time with them and have that sort of foundational basis of being with them and whatever. And it's like, what does that look like? How does that take shape? And what is God, showing me in certain ways? And, it's like, I think that oftentimes, I know I did this last year. It's like you try to put God in a bucket and you say, well, if this happens, then I'll do that. If this happens, then I'm going to do this, right? It's like, it doesn't
figure out the formula.
It doesn't necessarily work that way though, right? It's like,
so good.
So, okay, going back, because I don't think we answered. We did not answer. So
that's okay.
When you were asking about if we were tithing, if God didn't provide.
Yeah. If it puts you in a negative, where would you?
And so I think it goes back to the same thing, the heart posture. Yeah. Right. Like our sinful nature, right? Like, yes, that would feel crushing.
Yes, it'd be hard.
But if you're going into it with the heart posture of I am giving the first because of what you've done for me, right? I think while it will be hard to not see God provide financially, I think it's that initial heart posture and saying, okay, God, I'm still faithful, even if I don't see this happen.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think that's harder for us living in the time and in the country that we do, in a land of opportunity, you know, and prosperity.
Sure.
Even in the midst of where we've been the last 4 years, it's still, in some ways, a place of prosperity compared to other places.
Right.
Even compared to most of the New Testament settings where they were being encouraged to give and they were being encouraged to support leaders that they did not agree with at all, you know, that had completely different worldviews than them, and they were told to be to pray for them. They were told to persevere and to have endurance and to lay up treasures in heaven, not on earth. You know, those are bigger pictures. I think are harder for us today because that does mean, okay, I'm gonna have this in my hands for a while, but I'm gonna give it, and I'm not gonna see the reward until heaven.
Yes.
You know, until new heaven and new earth thing. So.
And that can be a tough thing for certain generations too. I mean, I know that, you know, I grew up with, and certainly some of the younger generation, and I don't mean to call you out, but you know, like it's very much a like instantaneous world of like, I have this and I want to see the fruits of that right now. Exactly.
It's
a hard
instant gratification.
That's what I was looking for. Instant gratification. Yeah.
And some of that's natural. I mean, my parents, they grew up through the Great Depression. I mean, they're that old, you know? So what do they want to do for me when I come along is they don't ever want me to have to go through that again, you know? So they provide for me. So I have my standard of living that I grow up in. Well, guess what I want to do for my kids? you know, I don't want them to even have what I had. So we always want the next generation to do better.
Sure.
But there has to always be this awareness of like, Jesus still is first in the midst of it, and it may cost me at times. Jesus obviously demonstrates that he empties himself, he gives himself completely. So I think there has to be that in the tension as well, because if not, it's too easy to venture over into prosperity gospel.
Exactly.
You know?
Yes.
And we don't want to do that.
No,
not at all.
That's I think through talking through this stuff, like obviously, you know, giving. Just because you tithe or just because you give to other people does not bring you prosperity. But I do think you could say in giving, you have a certain level of a new understanding of sustaining. Like I'm going to give and I know the Lord will sustain me. And I'm going to give out of the heart posture that the Lord will sustain us. You know, like I don't know how it's going to happen, but I'm trusting. Like I'm going to choose to wait on the Lord and know he will renew my strength to continue waiting on him. You know, I'm going to give to others because I know this is going to be a help for someone else. I'm going to give because, you know, whatever the reason, the heart posture. And I think that will produce a sense in you also. And then whenever it's done from the heart posture of sustaining, that's what's developed in you. And that's way more valuable than just like tangible money, you know, but to have the confidence of like, the Lord will sustain me. He will sustain me. And I want to help someone else. And at the same time, I know he will sustain me, you know? So like you've said, like just because you give doesn't mean your bank account all of a sudden increases. It literally decreases because you're giving.
That's right.
And
that's
also like, we didn't tithe because it was like, oh, well, we need more money. And if we give, then the Lord's going to provide, right?
Exactly. Good investment program.
Exactly.
It
doesn't work like that. But
it's 8% return.
It came out of an experience that Kyle had where he was relying on the Lord and realized that he cannot control everything. And so the tithing came out of that, which I think is totally different than giving in hopes of a return.
Well, I think that, and I think what's important is prosperity is relative, right? It's not necessarily like a financial gain to what we're talking about here, right? Which is, you know, whatever situation is happening in a person's life, like prosperity could be better health. It could be, you know, that your child found the Lord, or you know, like different ways of prosperity, right? It's not.
We always think of prosperity as
I think as Christians, when you say prosperity, right, immediately your head goes to, well, it's about money. You know, we're just talking about money. It's like,
new car, and
but it's
all
not. Like
things.
it's about the things, right? And it's like I think prosperity. it is about other things than just money,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Flat out. So
Yeah. So the other part of the conversation, though, is that God does put dreams and visions
Yes.
and longings in our heart that are from Him.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
and you see that in the New Testament. I mean, Jesus says, go into all the world and make disciples. Well, you can't do that without a vision, without intentionality, without resources. There's vision. There's something more. There's hope, and there's a direction. And then the New Testament, Paul's traveling and he's building churches and he's collecting offerings, and they're going places, they're doing things. They didn't just say, well, it's just the way it is. It's terrible here. Just suck it up. This is the way it's going to be. You know,
Yeah.
that was not the message. And even when Paul writes to Timothy, he doesn't say, now having contentment is great gain. He says, no, godliness with contentment is great gain.
Yeah.
Knowing you have been redeemed, knowing God's Spirit is within you, knowing He is driving you forward, that with a mixture of at the same time of, Truett and I were talking earlier, Truett replaced the word with satisfaction. I think it's a good, it's another way to look at that. Satisfaction,
place of contentment, yeah.
Yeah. Satisfaction with where I am and what God has for me. Both of those together are a powerful force.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
I have direction that God has given me in my life.
Right.
For myself, for our marriage, for our home, for our boys, for the future, for the kingdom. That's good. That's godly and right, mixed with a contentment. So
Of being satisfied. With
I'm
being
satisfied with where I am right now.
I know I'm filled because like God is sustaining me. He's over
Yes.
me. Like I'm satisfied with where I am. Not that it's like, and now all of a sudden I'm passive about everything in life.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not what it's about.
It is an unusual dichotomy though of like
Yes.
of godliness, of like feeling that satisfaction in God, knowing that God is in your life and in your heart, and then the earthly satisfaction of that, right? It's like, well, I know that God is faithful and whatever, but I'm still suffering here. I'm still desiring here. And like, how do you match those things? That's a wild
But
question.
there has to be a place there for that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, for Truett and I and the church itself here, there's that tension as well. Like, okay, we're on these 3 acres right here, and but we want to reach more people. We want to impact this region for the gospel.
Yeah.
And that's going to eventually mean something more than these 3 acres. I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
but
Exactly.
I can't just say, well, 3 acres is all I got.
We're good.
All I got,
Yeah.
we're
This-
good.
this is-
The whole like, hey, just be happy about what you have, and just kind of just shut up about any desire you actually.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, like,
Yeah.
is that
That's-
really what we're
yeah.
supposed to be living like? I just
Now, what I shouldn't do is go home every day defeated that we don't have more.
Yep.
Yes.
Or
So
looking at other churches at what they have and I don't have.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so the same applies across the board, you know, for us as families, individuals. I shouldn't be looking at my neighbor or driving through, you know, neighborhoods that I'm not a part of and thinking, man, I wish I had that. If I only had that, then I would be happy.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly.
Because you won't, because you'll get that.
And then you'll be like,
then
Yeah.
there's a bigger
it's,
house.
Oh, wait. A few years later,
Yeah.
I want more.
And I got this huge
If you-
garage. I need a boat.
Yeah.
And
You-
not that there's anything wrong necessarily with having a boat,
No, sure,
but if
yeah.
my identity is somehow
Yes.
attached to that,
Yes.
Yes.
that's
Looking
a
the
different story.
emptiness and the void that's there and filling it with this thing that's not
Never being
necessarily
content and wanting
Yes.
more.
Yes,
That's
yes.
right.
If
Yeah.
I had that, then people would like me more. If I had that, then I would feel better about myself.
Right.
You
Yep.
know,
Yeah.
that's the kind of place I think contentment enters in.
Yeah.
Sure.
But on the other side of thinking, no, I want to spend more time with my family. I want us to be able to experience God's presence together. I want us to be able to take a trip. I want us to. I want to be able to raise my boys in this setting.
Yeah.
Those are good things.
that's-
Those are right
Yeah.
things. I want to see. I want to see them not have to struggle in some places that I've struggled. Sure. I want to see them know their purpose in God's kingdom. You know, and I want them to experience the fullness of it. I want our family to make a difference for the kingdom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are good things.
Yeah.
Those are right things.
And the other thing that we have said here is that godly desires come whenever you're in that spot of like, I'm satisfied with where I am. I'm filled. I know God sees me. He's here for me. He's sustaining me. He's watching me. And whenever you're in that, it's easier, and I think it will naturally come overflowing from you to have a desire to go and do and be something out there because you have been filled. Not to try to be filled or try to be satisfied, but because you are, now God has placed this desire in me, you know?
Yeah.
So
That's good.
That's good stuff.
I do have to check myself a lot. How we were talking about like wanting like land.
Yeah.
And so even lately, two things. One, after talking to you a little bit about like, these are good desires. Oftentimes Kyle and I will talk about these things and we're like, we'll even realize that we have the same desires that we haven't really talked about before. And I'm like, okay, there's a reason that we have those.
Yes.
But also I think I have not been very good about going to the Lord and saying, I know that you've given me these desires and I know these desires are good.
Yes.
And I am trusting that we're going to see it.
Yes.
However you have it planned out for us.
Yes.
It might not look the way that I think,
Yeah.
but I'm going to trust and I'm going to continue to pray
Or the timing
and
of
be
it.
obedient rather than just like nonchalantly being like, Kyle, I would love to have some acreage so our boys can run wild.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
taking it to the Lord. But also whenever I said I had to check myself, there are many times, almost daily, that I get on Zillow and I'm like,
Yeah.
what's available?
Yes.
And then I get disheartened
Notifications.
because I'm like,
Yeah.
we can't afford any of it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so it's very much that, okay,
Yeah. Hits home,
I
doesn't
am,
it? Yeah.
I'm going to be
It's real.
content with where we are.
Yes.
Right. And while it's okay to get on Zillow every once in a while and check around, to be obsessed over it, where I'm feeling defeated,
Yeah.
I can't let myself get to that place because when I get to that place, I start not being content with where I am.
Yes,
It's a
yes.
slippery slope.
Yes. And Heather and I have that. She's probably the one she is the one who's much easier to just be content where she is. I can start looking at other places and, houses and, things and start thinking, man, we need to have that. I would like to have that. And what happens is I start being frustrated where I am.
Yes.
And then I realize that's not a good thing.
That's
what
such
I'm
a
doing here.
Easy downward spiral
It
to get
is.
into.
Yeah. It is.
It's just you're in that comparison nature, right? And it's, I think true. You said it a minute ago, which is finding yourself in sort of a satisfied or satiated world of godliness, right? And then understanding that you're good here, regardless. That's kind of where I'm at now. Is like trying to hold myself over, knowing that God is good, God loves me, that He is faithful and understanding, right? And then the challenge is though is like, but it's like, okay, I know that thing, but why am I fearful of making this change or stepping out and doing this thing, right? It's like if I know that I'm truly satisfied or I'm truly filled here,
Right.
why am I still scared here, right? And it's like, well, okay, maybe I haven't fully committed everything to the Lord,
So good.
Yeah.
right? And it's like, because I do feel like I think there still may be some hesitation and some anxiety or things that build up in that, but then almost immediately you should be able to just snap out of it and say, you know what, God is good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like same in the same aspect of like we turned it over on vacation that day. It was just like, well, here we go, here you go, Lord. Like that's it. Like in that same sort of like, I think I'm making it a little more carefree than it was, but I think in that moment, I think we sort of were just full blown like dedicated, and it's like, well, talking about a career change for me, I'm like, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
But also, as the main provider of our home, that
100%. Like
There's
that
weight
is,
to the-
we've
you
got
have a consistent income. I have a
yes
fluctuating
up and down, right?
income.
And it's- yeah. And
Yeah.
so there's that. Like it's the logical versus the spiritual that conflict in some of those things, and it's like, well, the logical comes from the spiritual. It's like why, like
Yes.
plug those things together, and then
yes.
you get sort of an abounding answer. And,
Yes.
and that can be very hard to do, though.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure you have found that when you talk together about those things, seek God together about those things, you start
Yeah.
to get better peace about that.
Sure.
Yes.
That's what Heather and I have experienced at least.
When it's not an off the wall sort of dream, we absolutely see eye to eye. I
This
can go
guy
kind of,
has
I can go
off
left
the
field.
walls dreams, and I'm like, hold on, have you thought
I'm like,
about
okay, hear me
this?
out. What about an alpaca ranch? Like,
I'm not even
There we'll
joking.
go.
He has talked about
Yes.
having an alpaca farm, and I'm like,
So
what? What are you talking about, Kyle? I'm
do you
like,
have any experience with alpacas?
yeah.
Don't they spit anyway?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
That's so
The
good.
Lord will guide me. Yeah.
Yes.
Kyle has this dreamer. Kyle has
Yeah.
this dreamer type, like
Yes.
I don't know, carefree, like.
So
I
good.
don't
But also
know,
when it
thing
comes,
about him,
like,
and I know it's good.
when
and
it's
I know
like
the
put
Lord
up or
will
shut
use
up,
that.
And
it's
so he put you together.
yeah.
Yeah.
When
Yes,
when it's
exactly.
like put up or shut up though, like when it comes down to brass tacks of the logical, I'm like, oh, I can't do it. Like I can't. And that's
I'll
where
join
she
in that.
steps
I
in.
think that's where, and I think that's the part of the
Tell me a
confidence that I
quote
know
about
that the Lord will have is like, hey, I come maybe not like an off the wall left field idea, but like I come with an idea and she and I talk about it and she has, I think I see the full confidence of her where the Lord is giving her peace over it, which then will allow me to have peace over it to know like, hey, the God is providing this route for us.
Or
and I don't think we've ever seen that.
Me
yet.
just shut it down.
Yeah. Yep.
But I was thinking, you said something. It was about trusting the Lord.
Yep.
And I think we really have to get down to trusting the Lord that he will provide what he knows we need,
Yes.
not what we've imagined that we need.
correct.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it
Because
does.
what we're imagining
We've made a
might
Christmas
not be
list.
what what the Lord has for us. They might be similar.
Yep.
They might have something to do with each other,
Yep.
right? But trusting, okay, Lord, like we have these desires and I know
Yes.
you're going to do what we need, not what
Yep.
we think we need.
Right.
Well, it's like he gives us an orange when we ask for an apple, but you realize they're both fruits.
Yeah.
Like,
But then there's the other awkward side of where we put together our list and he actually has something bigger or greater.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
We got to keep that as
He
part of
gives
the
you the whole
equation.
fruit basket.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
It give you a tree.
Yeah.
That'll
Yes. Yeah. That we
produce fruit for generations.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that has to be part of the conversation as well. He's
Yeah.
not just the eternal shut it down guy.
Yeah.
this for that.
Yeah, that's
or,
true.
Yeah. Okay.
So so I go back. There's a verse or two verses that they're just umbrella verses for me. They just fit over the whole of Scripture and over the whole of life. You're going to know them. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6.
Oh, yeah.
Trust in the Lord with all your heart. That's important. And lean not on your own understanding,
Oh, yeah.
your own list. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he shall direct your path.
Yep.
So good.
I think that fits
Yep.
in
does.
situations like this.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it kind of serves as umbrella over whoever's
Does.
listening today, wherever you are, whether you're single,
Yep.
whether you're in your 70s and you're a couple, whatever. Trusting God, you give me the desires that come from you. Put them in my heart.
Yeah.
Yep.
I will trust you with whatever you say they are, and then I'm going to acknowledge you. I'm not going to lean on my own understanding about how I'll get there. I'm going to acknowledge you in all my ways. You're going to be first, the first part, the first of my heart, the first of my thoughts, the first of my visions, dreams, and my contentment. And I know you're going to direct my path, and I'll walk in the path. We'll plan our steps, but he's going to direct the path.
Yeah. Amen.
Is basically how
Oh, yeah.
that works. So I think that applies for
does.
all of us.
Absolutely.
In situations like that. So, all right. So I'm thinking about people that are listening today, different situations they're in. They're not where Truett is or y'all are or where I am today. Maybe there's someone they're stacked with debt. And so much of what they've got, they're having to put toward debt. They can't even think in terms of savings accounts and vacations.
Yep.
How does all this apply for them?
I will. Okay.
Go ahead.
This has been us before when we first got married.
Okay.
We had debt. We had
School
to
loans.
go.
Yep.
Yep. We had to clean
payment.
up car payment.
Yeah.
Kyle had.
The Lord said, nope.
We wanted to buy a house. Kyle had so much on his credit that we needed to go
So
pay off to get
Okay.
it removed.
Wow.
history lesson there is I co-signed a lot as a kid for my mom.
Okay.
So there was some
Wow.
some debts there. So that was
Yeah.
that was a struggle.
So Kyle had some debts we needed to pay that weren't totally his.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
the same, the same applies
Yeah.
to trust in the Lord.
We
It is hard
Yes.
to pay those off, but the reward of paying those off and not being tied down,
Yes.
Slave.
It
a
is.
slave
Yes.
to your finances.
So freeing.
Yes.
And it's one of those things like you have to do it,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
It's a
But-
spiritual discipline
Yes.
toward a earthly
yeah.
issue
Yes.
that results in spiritual freedom.
It is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Yep.
the weight of the end of that, knowing that's done, the freedom from that, and the weight
Yep.
being gone
Oh, yeah.
is, I don't know how you put a money value on that.
You can't.
Right.
You
Right.
can't.
You can't.
It's
But it
literally
takes-
there's a weight that's been removed.
Yeah.
Like we remodeled, so not this house, but the house before we bought in 2017, and we spent 2 years living in it and remodeling it. And our intention was just to live there. Like we weren't planning to sell it. And then I think we got a desire. We're like, well, let's just sell it and, move on. I don't know why, but we did. And when we did that, we looked at this and we're like, man, we've made a little bit of money from this house, from selling it. And we looked at my student loans, right?
So that was the only thing we had left. We had paid everything else off.
It was like $25,000, right? And so you take this lump sum of money that you get from selling this house that you weren't expecting, that is now in your hands. You're like, man, look at that, right?
I sure would love to keep that.
What can we do with this, right? Like, and it's like.
And we chose that too.
We looked at it and we grabbed a checkbook and I wrote a 2, a 5, a comma, followed by 3 zeros. And never in my life have I felt so much pain in just writing a couple of numbers on a check. And I did it and we sent it to the bank. And I remember at the time, and we were sitting there in our kitchen writing the check, and I'm like, this is the most miserable feeling I've ever done. Because I did this, this was 2017. I was 6 years removed from college at that point or whatever it was,
and
right?
Still had.
And I was like, still had $25,000. I'm just writing this check for something I did how long ago?
Yeah.
But what you mentioned, right, is you write that, and that just, you just, it's a burden that's just gone. It's just like, there it is. And it's lifted and you feel bad because you're like, man, that was a huge check, but then it's gone. And you're like, I don't have to think about that anymore ever again.
It's not like every time you go out and you even buy food or anything like that, you're like, I could have freaking paid off.
That's right.
My debt.
I know.
Yeah. Oh, and we ate Dave Ramsey for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for a while.
No, when we first got married and we had all of that debt.
Yeah.
We had to go
we did
hunt
the
down
envelopes,
collection
we did the
agencies,
snowball,
pay them off.
all that. Yeah.
My friend had all of the Dave Ramsey, the whole kit. And I'm like, I need that. So we did the snowball.
She married me from my deep pockets, as you can tell.
So we ate potatoes and sausages and
That's
all
awesome.
sorts of stuff. So
it is, but it is like to the sense of like, it is a struggle, but I think that struggle can ignite a determination to really like knock that down, because it's hard to interpret and it's hard to understand when you're in it and where you're at. But it's like, if you can really focus in and understand that like you're going to be okay, like God will provide, right? Even though that this debt is looming and you have this payment that you're making, that you're just throwing money away seemingly, right? Because you're just paying for this thing you already did, right? God will provide on the end of it, and the feeling and the freedom you get out of the end result of it, and you just can't even elaborate.
Yeah,
correct.
It's not even providing financially after that's paid off. It's providing that freedom
100%.
to not feel like you are under the weight.
That's right. It's that result of doing those things have dictated a lot of our life of how we've lived debt free. I mean, we literally struggled because we have a new car now, which thank God for that, because I mean, we had the van, but it was time for us to move on from that. And we genuinely, it took us a while between her and I to really talk about like, okay, well, do we just save and save? We've
been debt free since that hailstorm came through.
Yeah.
And so,
And now, we're in a car payment again now. And it's like, I hate it personally. And I'm telling her like, we're doing it right now. We're grinding I told her, I was like, I'm paying that thing off in a year. I'm not kidding.
Because currently we feel like we're under that weight.
It's
and so
grind,
it's that discipline of.
And so there are things in our life now where we feel like we're pinching a little bit on, right? But it's the dedication in that moment to say like, getting that thing off and the freedom you have after that thing is gone is much more like enjoyable than having to live in that labor for 5 years or whatever it is.
Well, and I don't think we ever understand really how much that weight was affecting us.
Oh, it's
until it's gone.
Yes.
You're like, okay,
wow,
I can breathe. And you don't realize that maybe even your relationship, how it's different now because that weight is gone.
Yes.
You don't think, well, that's just money over here, and that we owe. That shouldn't have any effect on our relationship, but
it does.
It does.
It's
we're only on like month 3. I think of having a car payment, and we look at each other and we're like,
what's happening?
We really liked it when we were debt free.
But you're so right though, because that those kinds of stressors build, right? Whether it's intentional or not, right? You have this subconscious feeling of like, well, I have to do these things because I have to owe this, or it's always in the back of your mind that you always have this like thing that's hanging and nagging on you, right?
And it's you can't just enjoy
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then that stress leads to, I mean, we're all human, right? It leads to an effective, like, how are you going to treat your wife or how are you treat your kids?
Yes.
And it just comes out in these different
Yes.
outlets, and it's
Yes.
never a productive thing. It's like, if you can eliminate one more of those stressors in your life, and you can do that. That's a determination that you can choose to do to make that go away.
Discipline.
Right? And discipline, right? And then to your point, it's like, you don't understand the freedom of it until you literally have the freedom. And it is unreal.
Yeah. Relationally, even in your own mind and emotions, when you put your head on your pillow at night, you know, so that thing is not there anymore. Or when you wake up in the morning, to know that that's gone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right, let me ask one more question then.
Okay.
So we've talked about this today, mostly in terms of finances and honoring Jesus first. But I would assume that this is not just a financial compartment thing for you guys. This is not just here's how we make big decisions. This is probably sounds like it's become a lifestyle change for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
And in your home, it shows up. So talk about that for just a moment. How does that affected your relationship and your relationship to your boys, how you parent, marriage, bigger than just finances and decision making, the Jesus first lifestyle?
So I know for me specifically, right? I think we're both firstborn kids. We're both highly competitive, right?
We like to butt heads.
We do. We have had some very just good conversations, and so I think for me, what I've learned in really taken to heart and understood like how God and what Jesus is thinking of, like this is your marriage, right? And it's like, God calls us in the Bible, he says, love your wife as Christ loved the church, right? And it's like, you think about the vastness of that, like that's a big bar. That's a big bar to right. And so, but if you take that into smaller contexts and perspective, it's like, well, in a situation where we're in a heated argument over something, right? It's like, well, what would Jesus do, right? Your old bracelet, WWJD. It's like, what? But literally, like, how would Jesus love the church in this moment, right? And it's like, first and foremost, he would humble himself. He would walk in there and basically take the ownership of the contention on himself first, right? And so for me, in our marriage, it's been, okay, doesn't matter if she's right or I'm right and vice versa, right? It's like, I'm going to walk into this conversation, not all the time, I'm not perfect, but I do try to come in and say, I am sorry for my part of the situation, whatever the case is, right? And I think immediately that just sort of sets a tone for the conversation.
Good job.
That pivots away from, hey, we're arguing about this thing. It's like, no, we're you and I are arguing on the same thing. It's just the topic that we're arguing over, right? That's it. So that's a big one. I know the way we've kind of carried ourselves and the things we've done and changed in our home have pivoted into the boys as well. I think especially, I think we've struggled a little bit with our oldest for a while, and that's a conversation for another day. But that, we've had some struggles with him from that perspective. But I see it. I'm sure you see it too. But he is
the growth.
The growth in him is his determination for schoolwork at home is incredible now, right? He's doing a great job.
Used to be my one that
he's always defiant. He is always independent.
Now he's like the first one done. I'm like, Lord, like I have prayed over this for years.
There's almost it's a softness to him now that wasn't there before. And I wouldn't say like he was abrasive before or anything like that, but it was almost hard to get through to him on some things, right? And I think the way that God has been building our marriage and our family and us pouring into the Word of God with our kids and like praying over our kids and all these things. And, it's not anything specific necessarily, but it's like you can see this like softness developing in him, right? Where his heart is now developing and he's understanding like, certain aspects of life and how it's supposed to be and the respect factor and the discipline and all this kind of stuff. So those are just a couple of examples. I know you probably have some too, but
but I think back to, relating how we have experienced the Lord in our finances. So we were dependent on the Lord, right? And then we saw him provide. And I think the same goes for, especially I come from the place of being the mom in the house. And so struggling with the boys, right? Or struggling with my own emotions. We've talked about this on a previous podcast, like irritability or just anger sometimes and saying, Lord, I'm dependent on you because I cannot do this on my own. And I know that I know that you're going to provide, and you're going to see me through
Yes.
this season, right? And then I think about like something he's really been teaching me lately is that this is kind of a tangent, but I think it goes along with like him providing a mindset shift on how I view our children.
Yes.
Because oftentimes, stay-at-home moms will relate to this. You can get so just in it.
Yes.
Where you're just like, every little thing is getting on your nerves,
Yep.
right? And you're like, oh, these little children that I loved so much as little babies, and I loved snuggling them. They are not like that anymore.
It's a task list throughout the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the Lord recently has reminded me, Hannah, they are image bearers.
Oh, yeah.
And so looking at, it makes me want to cry. Looking at them in that way has made me just like,
Yep.
like, how could I ever look at them as
Yes,
these
so
little like
Yes.
wild things, you know?
So good.
Yeah.
And so I think that, I don't know, I think that's been a way that he has provided for me in a mindset shift,
Yes.
if that makes sense.
Definitely.
Where I've been like, Lord, you're going to have to help me.
And
You
there's some incredible things, and it sounds funny, but you can learn a lot from the reactions of your children.
Yep.
Right. If as a parent you just sort of step back and look. And I know the other day, like, you know, Hannah, we've had conversations about this before. She'll call me work on a tough day, and you know, I had to finally tell her, I'm like, hey, you have to kind of come to the conversation when you call me and you say you've had a rough day, right? For me, I'm immediately like, it's go time. Like I'm coming home. Like,
You did what to my wife?
You listen here, kids. You know. Like,
So he walks in the door like all ready to go, and I'm like,
you know,
wait,
and it's
hold
like,
on.
so I told her, I was like, you know, we're gonna have to change the conversation, and you know, it's gotten better. It's gotten a softer tone to it from her. It's like, hey, I'm struggling with this. It's not necessarily about, hey, the kids are doing this, but it's like, hey, I'm struggling with this. Where I was going with like listening to your kids though is and kind of, it's listening in like a nonverbal way, right? I mean, you can still listen, obviously, what they're saying, whatever, but in a nonverbal reaction is the other day, I think Hannah was struggling with something, and I asked her, you could tell she was, had a day, right? So I came in from work and I was asking her what was going on, and you know, this has happened Tuesday night or whatever it was, right?
It's going to make me cry.
I know. But it was one of those where, and I've had to release control over to the Lord on being quick to anger, right? Because it is very, very easy to just flip that switch and just go immediately into like, go to your room, you know, you know, just immediately just anger, right? And it's just like, wow. And then you step back and you're like immediately convicted. You're like, God, why am I doing that? It's like, why these kids are learning that from me? What am I doing? And in this moment, and I've been praying over this for myself, is like, God, you know, it's been nice too. We have a men's group that comes over to my house on every other Friday morning, and we kind of talk about these things as two. And that's been helpful to be able to have that outlet to talk to other men about and say, hey, this is happening. They're like, oh yeah, me too. I'm like, okay, cool. Let's hold each other accountable, right? Yeah. So, you know, that you have that in the back of your mind of like accountability, right, with other men, which I think is super encouraging for parents. I encourage you to find people who can hold you accountable, right? Biblical people. On top of, you know, praying over it with the Lord and saying, soften my heart. And I came in again Tuesday night or Monday night, whatever it was. And Hannah was pretty defeated on the day. And I said, hey, everything okay? You know, she kind of explained what was going on and didn't get too much into it. I was like, don't tell me too much. I was like, I'm going to talk to the boys. So I sat them down at the dinner table. We had dinner that night or whatever. And, normally the conversation would go into me being like a very like stern, disappointed father figure. Like, I'm so disappointed in you for treating your mom like this and whatever. Right. And I started the conversation off by, let's start something positive, right? I started asking each one of the boys, I said, tell me something good about your day today. Right? Give me something that was positive in your day that you enjoyed, right? And they all went around the table and they said something positive. I was like, okay, good. I was like, now tell me something that your brother did or whatever, like one of your brothers did that you were kind of shocked with or impressed with or whatever. And they went around the room and started saying positive things about each other, right? And then you could kind of start seeing the demeanor of the conversation change. That's what I said, nonverbal, right? Is the position of their minds has changed now, right? My demeanor has changed. It's softer tone coming out. And then we started to really get into the point of the conversation, which is about
disobedience.
Disobedience and like, you know, doing the respectful things inside of the home and whatever. But it was disarming in that conversation, not only for them, but for me as well. I was
Yeah.
like, this is, you could
Total
see it. You could
mindset
literally
shift,
see their faces just soften and just like relax in that moment. And I looked over at Hannah a couple times.
Yeah,
and
because I'm not at the dinner table. I'm standing at
She's in
the
the kitchen.
island
Yeah.
just watching.
Yeah.
Just
what
watching
is
them.
happening? Yeah.
And literally like everything in me, and I like started getting teary-eyed, and I'm like, they are so sweet.
yes.
Yeah.
They said they loved doing this today, and they said one of them said that this brother was patient, and
another
I was
another
like,
side of it too, like husbands, that's a life hack for your wife right there.
Come on.
Just
Yeah.
fill some cups.
attractive.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. You want a biblical way. There you go.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but it was like it was an incredible moment for not only them but for myself. Of like, this parenting doesn't have to be like screaming until I have a headache or like
and shouldn't be.
and shouldn't
but-
be, right?
Yeah,
But I mean,
yeah.
again, we're human, and I think that's where God is building in our lives, right? I mean, we've been parents for 10 years now, right? And we're still learning things.
Yeah.
And I think that's the whole intention of it is like, you're going to fail. And that's been a big lesson for us too, to the boys. More importantly is like, mommy and daddy are going to fail, guys.
Yeah.
We are not,
Right.
Yeah.
you can trust us with all your heart, but man, you have got to trust in the Lord,
So
period.
good.
Plain and
So
simple,
good.
because we will
Yeah.
never live up to that. Right. And it's an
That's
honest truth of it. Right. And it's for us as a human, that's a hard pill to swallow. It's like, you
Yeah.
want to be everything you can for your kids, and you can be, but it's
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
you're never going to fulfill what the Lord can fulfill in their heart.
That's
So
true.
good.
So it's cool to see changes
Yeah.
within our family.
Yes.
Yes.
That's so
Well,
good.
that's perfect. That was my assumption.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
you just verified all of that.
Perfect.
Because I
Figured it
think
out.
it comes back to that same core truth.
It does.
Seek first
Yeah.
the kingdom of God
Exactly.
Yes.
in
Yes.
every area of your life
Yes.
and his righteousness, and all these things
Yeah.
that we get so stressed, worried about, concerned about, they'll be added.
Yes.
Him first, he'll take care of the rest, whether it's financial
Yeah.
or if it's the heart of your boys.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or
So
the heart
good.
of
Which
your
that
marriage.
one's
Yes.
so much more
Yes.
important to me.
Yeah.
The
Yes.
heart of my children.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
good.
yeah.
And so what has happened is you've chosen to honor Jesus first in your home,
Yeah.
and it has brought a heart change to your home.
Yes.
Yeah.
You
It's-
can't measure that in dollars and cents.
No.
But there is a tangible difference, and it is
Yeah.
noticeable.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's very noticeable. It's not as identifiable initially, but it is very, very real.
Yeah.
That's right.
So
and
good.
it brings the presence of God into your house. It brings peace into your house. They see it, they
So
know
good.
it, and you are impacting them for generations.
Yeah.
That's
Because
yeah.
they'll grow up remembering those things, and this will
Yeah.
be now their framework that someone will ask them one day.
Yeah.
Tell us about when you were growing up.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you will have set the stage
Yeah.
for what it looks
So
like to
good.
have a
Yeah.
Jesus honoring home. Way to go.
Fires me up.
Thanks.
Stuff, man. I mean,
It is encouraging to hear. It really is, because it's
Yeah. Because
Yes.
sometimes in the thick of it, you can
yeah,
feel
it's like,
defeated,
yeah.
you know.
Oh my goodness.
Well, and you said it a minute ago. You said the timing of it, and it's like for us, like the expectation of timing. I know for me, it was like you start implementing these things. You're like, well, I'm not seeing the change. I'm not seeing the change.
It's not
Yeah.
instant.
Right.
Yeah.
But then over time, you look back and you're like, man, God has been building this,
Yes.
and here's the fruits of it, and it's still building. Right? It's not done. It's not complete.
Right.
But that's another challenge too. Is separating that timing from your own.
Yeah.
So,
But I think how you said it's still building.
Yeah.
I think there's another aspect of relying and trusting on the
Yes,
Lord. I have
exactly.
seen you
Yes.
work
Yeah.
in our
Yes.
family, and there is still more
Yeah.
to be worked on.
we have the
And-
two older ones, or that you can see their change, and then we've got the two younger ones, and we're like, all right, time to reload.
Yeah.
Let's go.
and
Here
you're
we
about
go.
to walk into a new season.
Yeah.
You're about
And
to
it
walk into the
changes.
teenage years
Oh,
that are,
yeah.
that are
See you
different as
Yeah.
well.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so God will provide for you in that.
Yeah.
'Cause you've learned the regimen
Yeah.
of what to do now. Seek the Lord first in all areas.
Yeah.
Even when it comes to discipline,
Yeah.
I'm going to honor him first in that. So
Yeah.
let it go.
Thank
Love
you.
it.
Man.
Fires me up, y'all. It's good stuff.
I mean, for us, it just drives back to why we exist even as a church. It's the vertical first.
Yeah.
You know,
Exactly.
not to be commercially here, promote
No,
vertical,
it
but
is.
it's the point. It's the truth. It's the reality. If you'll seek first, if you lift him up, and
Yep.
then you'll know how to live him out
Yes.
in that whole process. So thank y'all so much.
Oh,
of
absolutely.
course.
So good, so real, so
Yeah.
relevant.
Exactly.
So
So good.
anything else today? You
No,
want
just
to add?
words of encouragement, hopefully for I'm not only ourselves,
I'm
it's a great
encouraged.
reminder, but just just in general, like it's, it is obtainable, through Christ and through your faith. It doesn't maybe seem like it wherever you may be, but it is obtainable.
Yeah.
And so,
It's good.
Not all roads are the same, but it is achievable. So,
Yes. All right. Yep. Well, a big thank you to everybody who watched and participated today.
Yeah.
I hope they'll share and pass it along, because we're gonna keep lifting him up and living him out here and seeing life change just like this. Thank y'all.
Amen.
Thank you.